marching boldly to the future. Justice has been won. We have found our voices, hear our song throughout the land. Failure is impossible, the vote is in our hands.
Failure was impossible, we struggled for so long. We were ridiculed and silenced, but the work was carried on. Failure was impossible, our vision was too strong. We planned and marched and lobbied, then our daughters carried on.
Forward into light, a new day has begun.
We struggled for so long,
marching boldly to the future.
We were ridiculed and silenced,
a new day has begun.
but the work was carried on.
We have found our voices, hear our song throughout the land.
Our vision was too strong.
Failure is impossible.
We planned and marched and lobbied,
the vote is in our
then
hands.
our daughters carried on.
We thank you, Susan B. Anthony. We thank you,
Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
we thank you,
Frederick Douglass.
we thank you, Mary Olney Brown. We thank you,
Inez Milholland.
we thank you,
Alice Paul.
we thank you, Emma Smith DeVoe. We thank you,
May Arkwright Hutton.
we thank you,
Carrie Chapman Catt.
we thank you, Abigail Scott Dunaway.
Forward into
Failure was
light,
impossible,
a new day has begun.
we struggled for so long.
Marching boldly to the future.
We were ridiculed and silenced,
Justice has been
but the
won.
work was carried on.
We have found our voices,
Failure was
hear our song
impossible,
throughout the land.
our vision was too strong.
Failure is impossible.
We planned and marched and
the vote
lobbied,
is in our
then our
hands.
daughters carried on.
Failure is impossible.
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 Welcome. I'm Martha Wheelock, the board president of the National Women's History Alliance, who brings you this webinar, Moving Women's History Forward. There are attendees here from all over the country showing that women's history is national, global, and everywhere. We kick off this challenging year, 2024, with a powerful theme, honoring women who advocate for equity, diversity, and inclusion. Here, we explore how to keep women's history alive, pertinent, unifying, and empowering, how to prioritize visibility. Thank you, sponsors and supporters, for your support of this webinar. This webinar is also to honor the vision and persistent work of our recently retired Executive Director, Molly Murphy McGregor, who co-founded the National Women's History Alliance 44 years ago and has helmed it ever since. We thank Molly for her steadfastness and insistence that telling women's stories enriches not only each citizen, but also the nation. Thank you, Molly. I look forward to the presenters today for the various paths and action they are committed to give us ways that they have been inspired to spread women's contribution and accomplishment. To begin this journey, it's my great pleasure to introduce Penny Colman, an award-winning veteran writer of over 20 books, mostly about women. Her books tell stories of Civil War spies and the friendship between Stanton and Anthony that changed the world, even bathrooms. The American Library Association has honored Penny's books for their importance to young readers. Now Penny has also adopted writing and her curiosity to blogs, travel books, and performances. Welcome, Penny.
Last week, I received an email from Martha with notes about the program for today. And this is what the email said. The Penny tells about her work and what she's found excites folks about women's history and what she's done to celebrate women's history. Now, the fact that I had already done a different PowerPoint, I looked at this and I said, gosh, who wrote those instructions? And Martha told me that those instructions came from Molly, as in Molly Murphy McGregor. And when I get instructions from Molly, I always do what she said, because she's just been an incredible advocate and supporter, and just a credible, really a forward-moving person, a key person, also for the establishment of Women's History Month as a national holiday. And one of the really many important things about the National Women's History Project is, from the beginning of its founding, it was multicultural, and intersectionality was a byword for the National Women's History Month long before it became a target of unmentioned governors. Always paid attention to gender, race, ethnicity, class, ability, disability, organized events, produced a mountain of material, print, media, had organized a network. We could just go on and on about the importance and the achievements of the National Women's History Project, founded in 1980 in Santa Rosa, and now is transitioned in 2018 to the National Women's History Alliance. I first met Molly in 1992. She had come from California and was leading a workshop at New York University. At the time, I happened to be on our local school board, and so I had gotten an invitation to attend this workshop. And I was just, this was at a time when women's history wasn't much talked about. There certainly wasn't anything going on in the schools. And there was Molly, full of energy and information and passion for this subject. It happened to be also the year, and if Molly, you can, Muffy, you can click. It also happened to be the year that my first two books about women, and all my books are for all ages. I really tried to write my books in a way that they would be accessible and engaging for, across the spectrum of people's ages and abilities. The first one is the biography of Dorothea Lynn Dix, the great humanitarian crusader on behalf of people, particularly indigent people with mental illness, really a household name in the 19th century. And then the Women in the Civil War, which I actually wrote after watching Ken Burns' series on the Civil War and noticing that there were no women mentioned, except a brief, rather kind of nasty comment about how difficult Dorothea Dix was. She was superintendent of nurses during the Civil War. So I asked a friend who happened to be a film editor on Ken Burns. And so I asked her, so I said, Margie, did anybody talk about women in the Civil War? And she said, well, Ken said they didn't do anything. So I decided to write Spies, Women in the Civil War. So after the workshop, Molly and I met, and I introduced myself, and I told her that I think at the time Dorothea Dix had just come out in the spring and Spies was coming out in the fall of 1992. And I said I was thinking about entering a doctoral program. And she said, why would you do that? You're already started, just keep writing. And so I did. And here's a quick look at the books that sort of flowed after that meeting with Molly. Fannie Lou Hamer, Frances Perkins, Madam C.J. Walker, toilets, bathrooms. I'll explain that later. Mother Jones, Women in Society. Now, I asked Muffy to stop here because there's a story behind this book. This cover that book with that cover arrived the day before I was due to speak in Worcester, Massachusetts, at a dedication of a library to Frances Perkins. So I took it with me. So I walked into the library and I was holding the book, and I saw a librarian walking toward me, and she was holding a book, and this was her cover. And it's the same book with two different covers. And the story is this cover with the military woman on the front was what was being distributed throughout the United States. And the other cover, if you can go back, Buffy, that was being distributed internationally. And that picture actually is of a woman. I took her on, so she was on the streets of New York campaigning against, I think, Rudy Giuliani at the time. So continue on. Yeah, so, and again, just Buffy, you can just go through quickly so we can stay in the time frame here. And as you're looking at these books, I'm sure you've probably noticed actually 4 books that seem to be outliers. Toilets, the history of the bathroom, corpses, coffins, and crypts, history of burial, strike, and Thanksgiving. Any number of people who have interviewed me have wondered about those books and what did they have to do with women's history. And as I point out, women and men also use bathrooms and die. Women workers have been striking since the early 1800s, and the story of Thanksgiving becoming a national holiday is inextricably wound up in the story of Sarah Josepha Hale, the preeminent editor of the 19th century. And in terms of many of the rituals around dying and death and burial involve women, from, preparing the body to preparing food. So all of those, in my mind, are also integral to telling the story of women. Another way I've celebrated women's history in terms of books, another way that I've celebrated women's history is through print articles. I sort of started as a journalist. Muffy, click. I started as a journalist and found it great fun to write for the magazine market. This, my cover story for Girls in Sports was published in 1993 and actually won a Miller Lite Women's Sports Journalism Award. And as I remember, Molly came to the big celebration at the Waldorf Astoria, which was packed full of just all the top women athletes at the time. The next one is a wonderful literary journal called Book Women, and it's published specifically about women who love books. And this article was really fun to write because it was about a 23-day road trip my partner and I took through England in the footsteps of suffragists. And this also, some of these print articles also show up on, which I'll talk about in a little bit, my blog. I also celebrated women in, Muffy, do you want to click? In my blog. And this was a 4-day trip. And this is a portion of the extraordinary memorial in Lorton, Virginia, on the site of the Occoquan workhouse where 91 suffragists were imprisoned in 1917 for peacefully picketing the White House. And of all the many memorials and pieces of memorials I've seen, this is a stunning commemorative display to the suffragists who were imprisoned. And there actually are 91 women's names, and it's a panel with, five states. The top plaque is the name of the state. There are 18 states. So it's 5 states, 8 states, and another 5. And it's interesting because this young girl actually was there with her father, and she's reaching up to touch the name of Mabel Vernon. And if you go next, Muffy, that trip ended. So it started in Lorton, Virginia, and then we made many other stops, but we ended up in Dover. And this is just a really fun marker. And it's interesting because it's actually etched on the marble, which is sort of a new way memorials are being done. And that's Mabel Vernon. And she is this famous, her famous quote of the one that we've certainly heard about, calling the suffragists iron-jawed angels. And Mabel Vernon, who's just such an important person in the fight for the vote, asks, is that supposed to be an insult? So in terms of blogging, and could you go to the next slide, Molly? I think although my blog has, I blog about other aspects of women's history, a number of blogs are devoted to the road trips that my partner and I have been taking for what, I think probably close to 34 years now, in the search of landmarks. And it sort of came in my midlife realization of, where were all the women, particularly in public spaces, in public areas. And so I just started looking and driving around. And every time either I would have a business trip or Linda would have a business trip, I'd always do extensive research to see if there were any memorials. This is a statue of a woman I've written about, one of my favorite women in women's history. Of course, I have many. This is Fannie Lou Hamer. And this actually is a resin copy of a statue that was dedicated that stands in Ruleville, Mississippi, her hometown. And this one was just dedicated last year, and it stands in the convention hall in Atlantic City, where Fannie Lou Hamer made her famous 1964 interview where she said, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired," which of course has been quoted by many politicians since. So this is exciting to see this. Another way that I've celebrated women's history is also through presentations. Muffy, next slide. Other media. So other media, these were really fun to do. These are two films I did. One is based on my book on the left of women war correspondents in World War II. And it's a short 13-minute video, but it's just full of like energy and wonderful, wonderful images. That was fun. The next one is, you can see both of these on my YouTube channel. The next one, Honoring American Heroines, is short. It's just 3 minutes, but it's extraordinary because the producer actually got Woodlawn Cemetery to open the door of this massive mausoleum because I was determined to see if it was true. Had Elva really been buried with the purple, white, and gold suffrage banner? So there's this dramatic scene where opening this door that hasn't been opened since 1933. And I walk in, a much younger me, this was in 1995. I walk in and it's there. It's really there, although it's very, full of holes and tattered. But Elva was so important to the suffrage movement because she financed so much of it, and held events, and she was her own person, but she was there, and she put her resources and herself into the fight for the vote. Okay, on to presentations. I think that Martha said in my intro that I did countless, and it's true, countless presentations, and my theme was always celebrating women. But I would tailor it. For example, there was a period in the 2021 through that whole 10-year period where military installations were holding really lavish and government agencies lavish women's history celebrations. It was always quite an event. So I would, for example, do celebrating women and really focus on military women or business women. This particular one that I did, and this dates back, I think, 2004, was art. And this is a poster. This is on the right, is from the National Women's History Project. And I wanted to put this in because I wanted to show you the last slide of this program, of this particular presentation. So imagine you're sitting in a room, and the room has there were maybe 35, 40 women there. It was at a government agency in Philadelphia. Next slide, Muffy. And the last slide is this one. And the first thing that I put on the screen was the rhinoceros. And I talked about how I was taking my granddaughter to the Bronx Zoo, but maybe sometimes 2 or 3 times a month, because she lived close and it was a fun thing to do. And we would stop at this rhinoceros. There are actually two of them there, but we'd stop at this. And time again, I would hear people walk by and they would talk and they'd refer to the rhinoceros as a male rhinoceros and wonder who made it, but it was always male. So, of course, I then point out that if you read the plaque at the bottom, it clearly says that it was sculptured by a woman and that the rhinoceros's name is Bessie, which is, traditionally a woman's name. So then my point was that we have to be aware of our assumptions, we have to pay attention, and we have to remember that women's history is everywhere to inform and inspire everyone. So this slide gets a lot of energy going in the room, and the man who happened, there was a man sitting next to me, and he happened to be the head of this particular unit. And my ears could not even believe what he said, because what he said was, I knew that rhinoceros was a woman because she looks like my mother-in-law. So, at any rate, I can't hear your reaction, but I suspect your reaction was probably akin to mine. Was, did he really say that? His co-workers, and he was the boss of this unit, all turned in a single movement and sort of frowned and glared at him. But those are the kinds of things you kind of have to be prepared for when you're talking about women's history, is that you're going to run into somebody like that. And I guess just keep on and don't be deterred. So the question is, and Molly's charge to me was to talk about how I've celebrated women's history. But the other thing is what excites people? What excites people about women's history? And the single answer that to me just kept coming in my head when I thought about this is, what excites them is to discover that women's history matters. That's what it is. And so here some of the things that I've discovered about why women's history matters. And I'm going to have, Muffy's going to put up the first one. And I just have a brief thing to say about this. This thing about not being so easily duped into thinking that girls and women have to keep proving themselves over and over again. That happened when I was speaking at an organization in New York called NEW. It was an employment agency for women to come and learn to do hard hat jobs. And I was presenting about my book, Rosie the Riveter, and the lights were down and I was showing slides, and all of a sudden in the darkness, somebody yelled, "Stop," like in this fierce voice. And I sort of recoiled a little bit because it was very intense. And what it was is it was a young woman. We put the lights on with this fierce look at her eye, pointing at me. And she says, "Are you telling me that women have already done these jobs?" And then the woman sitting next to her, kind of trying to, I think, mediate the tension, said, "Of course, that's what she's telling you. Those slides are of real people," because I was showing slides of women workers during World War II. And she said, "Then why do we have to keep proving ourselves over and over again?" And I walked out of that session with her, and I was standing on the corner of a street in New York City. And that's what actually prompted me to write my book, Girls, A History of Growing Up Female in America. So Muffy's going to go through the rest, and I'm not going to read them. She's just going to have them there. But these are just a few of why I've discovered, and the people who I've been engaging with about women's history over the years, who says that women's history matters. So Muffy, if you just go through them quickly, and you can see role models, inspiration, making sense, It's only half the story. Of course it matters. Antidote to stereotypes and barriers and misogyny, self-doubt, self-depreciation. So many women have told me that it's learning women's history has done so much for their self-esteem. Rethinking. Yes, many historians have had to backtrack and rethink and redo. Great true stories, for sure. We can go on, and you'll hear more of them today from the other panelists. And finally, for me, it's because women's history is fun. So thank you all for your attention. It's a thrill for me to be on this terrific panel. And I'm going to turn things back to Martha.
Hot off the road of doing great political action today is our next presenter, Lisa Sales. And so in addition to being very active, minding the political scene in Virginia, a crusader against sexual and domestic assault, Lisa was a leader for winning Virginia's ratification for the ERA, just recently the last state needed for this fulfillment. Lisa is the president of Virginia Now and a model and a modern Alice Paul. She's indomitable, and she just got on the line. She's just off the plane or train. And thank you, Lisa, for getting in and being patient with all of this. Take it away.
Hi, well, thank you so much for the lovely, lovely introduction. That Alice Paul praise is, I don't know that that's deserved, but I so appreciate it. If you can find your reaction key and you're able, or put something in the chat, or the Q&A, wherever you can find a way to react, if you know zip, zero, or very little about the Equal Rights Amendment. It's the 100-year-old Equal Rights Amendment, and we just celebrated its centennial anniversary. And not only that, I think Martha and the National Women's History Alliance all maybe knew unconsciously, subconsciously, but today is actually the 4-year anniversary, of Virginia becoming the final historic 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. If you remember from your constitutional history way back when, it takes 38 states once Congress has passed a resolution to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. So I'm just joyful to be with you here today to break down barriers, to discuss this sort of blend of history, both past and present and modern history, and move women's history forward to the present. So join me, will you, on this journey to equality. Okay, now hopefully I can do my slides. For those who don't know about the Equal Rights Amendment, it's 24 little words. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. And then we have these two other sections that are common to amendments. I'm going to start off by telling you that when Virginia became the 38th state to ratify, it spurred, and that's why I want to talk about what you can do and how you can take action in your states. And by the way, to all my California peeps, shout out to my birth state. You guys are wonderful. New York State is wonderful. There are some other states doing really good work, but we all need to audit our statutes, our state statutes, even our federal statutes from time to time. So I want to take this to the local level for a quick moment. So I know there's a lot of words on this page, but the Virginia Now Virginia Law Audit Project, colloquially known as VLAP, is really a whoops, I'm going ahead here. Sorry about that. Is really a modernization review. And it's to identify instances of discrimination, both in the letter of the law, so how the law is written, and in the spirit of the law, think unintended consequences. So if you're reading this slide, really we're reviewing our state code, one, to see if terms are not gender neutral, are not religious or religion neutral, or reflecting any kind of inappropriate terms that show preference to one gender or faith. And then we're also looking to identify any forms of discrimination about the way the law is written. And even if it's written perfectly, it may be having secondary or tertiary effects that we're unaware of out in our communities. And so that's what we're taking a look at to do. I'm going to just show you very quickly Why this is important from a terminology perspective. Often in our code, whenever we use the word governor or attorney general, it's followed by the word he. When you look at our state constitutions, and yes, there's a difference between a state ERA, there are state equal rights amendments, and about half, just over half the states have them. And there are federal, the federal equal rights amendment, which does exist. It is duly ratified. It has just not been published, unfortunately, in our US Constitution. Thus, it is not recognized. But we are Atlas, pushing a big stone, a big ball up the hill. So, but you'll see where I have highlighted, right, that it's equality of men, that all men. Virginia has the oldest state legislature. It's 403 years old in the nation. So folks did not consider women as full and equal citizens. So a little bit of that history. So we see that no men or set of men, all men, his, he, his, right? That only a union between one man and one woman. We're back to that again, man and man. If you look down here in section 16, it was a shock to me when I undertook this project that it even mixes church and state here. If you see this practice, a duty to practice Christian forbearance, love, and charity. That's actually in the Virginia State Constitution. So I encourage you all to open up your constitutions and take a look. But why is there this mix of church and state here? What does Christian forbearance even mean? And I have spoken to constitutional experts in Virginia and nationally, and they can't tell me. So that should be changed. This is an Arizona case study. I just put a smattering in here to share with you what we're trying to do. Again, this is just about the terminology piece, not about the larger practice of discrimination and the law's disparate impact or disparate treatment. And I would encourage you all to look up the terms disparate impact and disparate treatment. It's all about discrimination and protected classes, which we're trying to avoid. So ratification of the Federal Equal Rights Amendment has spurred this activity to look at, do a deeper dive into our codes and to make them more equal and full of more equity, really. And so you'll see here, my favorite is in your upper, the top left corner of your screen. As a survivor of sexual assault, I don't really appreciate that victims are only referred to in the female gender, right? Why do we say policemen? We know there are plenty of female officers. It should say police officers. We know there are gender neutral or non-binary officers. It should say police officers, right? Also interesting is that prisoners are often referred to as men. And you'll see that throughout. Clergyman. And I would even argue that Arizona's suggestion to their state legislature, where they say the clergy or priest, it should really be spiritual leader if we really also want to be religious neutral. So I was also asked and charged with many things with little time to discuss. And I'm going to take a point of personal privilege here. And my personal story is that I was sexually assaulted. And an article was written about it in May 2021 and published. I encourage you to Google it. And then when the story printed, I was summarily fired from my 10-year-long employer. And this just appeared last month in Law 360. And so there really is a lot of employment discrimination, discrimination based on sex, and retaliation. And you might say, well, why are you bringing this case, Lisa? Is it for the money? It's not for the money, because I could have settled. It's for all of us, and it's for the future of America, because if we don't press on our laws and change laws at the state level and not press on our courts and our judiciary, we are never going to get the change we seek. And unless we elevate and amplify our personal stories, we're not going to get the change that we seek. And companies hate what? What speaks to them? Headlines. I'm sure Booz Allen, my former employer, is not happy that this article reads, Booz Allen used sex assault story to fire worker. So I am bringing a Title VII claim, which is part of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 against Booz Allen. But until we have very strong state equal rights amendments, and most importantly, a federal equal rights amendment to give laws teeth in state governments and in federal government, all this business about codifying Roe, guess what, folks? If we codify Roe and we have no protections for gender discrimination in our Constitution, you know what's going to happen? It's going to go right up to SCOTUS, and we're going to see what happened with Dobbs. So keep that in mind. We can certainly have more questions and talk about that. I know I just threw a lot at you. Okay, where are we with the Federal Equal Rights Amendment? I wanted to give you a bit of a status update. It is a 103-year-old amendment, 100-year-old amendment. It was introduced by Alice Paul and Crystal Eastman 100 years ago last July. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And I'll show you some fun stuff and some less dire talk in a moment. So Senator Ben Cardin and Rep. Ayanna Pressley introduced SJ Res 4 in the Senate, HJ Res, its companion in the House, in January 2023. It's important to note that the Equal Rights Amendment has been introduced in some form or another in every session of Congress since its initial introduction. So this SJ Res 4, HJ Res 25 is to remove this arbitrary time limit and affirm the ERA as the valid 28th Amendment. We say time limit because language matters. You often hear it referred to as a deadline. Nothing is dead about the ERA. Nothing is dead as long as all of us in this very room are willing to fight for it. I've turned warrior into a verb, to warrior for it, and to create a cacophony of voices that are so loud that you can't but to hear us. So that's what's going on with SJ Res 4, HJ Res 25. In addition, much like ERA came on the scene, Martha Griffiths back in 1970 introduced what's called a discharge petition. Now, what is that? It's when the party in favor or the controlling party of the House won't, because it will not let a bill out of committee, and it's in sort of this committee purgatory, if you will, with no action being taken, a member of Congress can request a discharge petition to get it removed from committee and go directly to the floor for a vote, which is what we are seeking here. And much like what happened in 1972, ERA arrived on the House floor by way of a discharge petition. We are trying to take a page from history and bring this into the modern effort now and bring it to the House floor. And we are really, we're really close. I think we needed 218 votes to get it out of committee. And I think we're about 10 short. I have to check those numbers, but this is the importance of you calling and clamoring your members, whether they be Democrat, Republican, or independent. So also brilliantly in March 28th, the first ever Congressional Equal Rights Amendment Caucus was formed in Congress. It is the 5th largest caucus in Congress today. Additionally, Senator Gillibrand and Rep. Cori Bush joined the mix, and they have a different approach. They have brought SJ Res 39 and HJ Res 82, which was unveiled also in July. And that is to compel the United States Archivist, who per Article 5 of the United States Constitution is simply the secretary. The recorder, has the ministerial duty, if you will, to record the 38 state certify constitutional amendments, publish them to the Federal Register where they can be recognized. That has not happened. The archivist in the Trump administration was told not to publish and that the ERA was, quote, dead. The Biden administration came in and said, oh, no, the Equal Rights Amendment is not dead. It's up to Congress and the courts. There's a lot of disagreement about that. So we have both both resolutions to remove the time limit and one to, if we have some lawyers in the room, is sort of a writ of mandamus to compel the archivist to publish immediately in the Constitution. I already talked a little bit about the discharge petition. What I need you to do now, all of you, is take out your phones. This is your call to action today on the anniversary of the 38 states ratification. While my home is California, I'm born and raised in California. I live in Virginia and have been just one of the people helping to lead this effort. And so if you could take out your phones and turn on your cameras and scan this QR code for me, please sign for ERA, sign your support, share it with your families, share it with your friends. We can send out a unique link for all of you And if you keep having trouble with the QR code, just go to signforera.org, please. Share it with your friends, share it with your families, talk about it over lunch, over dinner, at holidays, at parties, at barbecues, of course, when it's warmer. We really, this is a unique petition. You might say, I've already signed a petition involving the ERA. You haven't signed this petition. This is a unique effort that came out of the students at Hunter College in New York City, under the shepherding of former Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, who is now a professor in their think tank there at Roosevelt House. And what's unique about this is once you sign, we can drill down by congressional district. We can see how many people signed in support of the ERA by congressional district. And then if you are not a current supporter of the ERA, we can say we're a force to be reckoned with. When we have 3 million signatures on this thing, I'm going to show you where we're at today, because this petition is not even a year old yet, but we'll be able to drill down and go to those members of Congress and say, you have overwhelming support for this very popular amendment. It has 80% support across the nation. Why aren't you acting with the people? The ERA is now more important than ever. And I just saw and spoke with the vice president this week. And she said to me, Lisa, she pointed to my lapel pin. And she said, Lisa, she said, if we had the ERA, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in now. So take that in for a moment. We would not be in the mess we're in now, because this is all about gender discrimination. So please, please, please help us get out the word for Sign for ERA. Okay, so I promised you a map and to show you where we are today. This is where we are as of, this timing is a little bit off because it's in developer time, but as of yesterday evening, we are approaching 90,000 signatures. When we want to get to 3 million, you know that is not enough. And you can see the numbers by state, right? Of course, the states with the higher population, the more progressive states on the edge, are going to have more supporters. Pass it to your families in Wisconsin and Idaho and Kansas in the middle of the state. It's up to you to talk about how important our equal rights are today. Okay, and you can see the count of petition signatures as they're fluctuating. I hope that you will help me. If you see to the right of your screen, that green little graph, I hope that you will help me show a spike today as a result of this wonderful National Women's History Alliance opportunity in chat. Okay, another thing you can all do, you might say, why mayors? Is you can talk to your mayors, your city council members, go to your town halls, have them sign for ERA. We'll give you flyers if you want flyers. I'll make my personal phone number available, my personal email available, and I can help guide you in this effort. You can also reach out to team@sign4era.org. And if you can do what I just did in Georgia, I happened to be at a conference speaking on several panels, and the Georgia mayor was there. So I said, Mr. Mayor, sir, do you know about the Equal Rights Amendment? He said, yes, I do. I said, Mr. Mayor, can you sign for ERA? He did it right there. He put his cell phone on the QR code. He did it right there in front of me. I snapped pictures. You know what we did? A press release. We sent it out. It got coverage in local media. The same thing happened with the Albany mayor of New York and the Richmond mayor. And it ended up on also local television channels. And you say, but they don't have a vote, Lisa. They're not in Congress. They're not the president. What control do mayors have? Well, mayors meet you where they are, right? They can talk about it. They can use their platforms. And every time we get a news item, it amplifies and elevates the ERA and teaches people who know nothing about it why it's so important for our equality and our equity. So we can talk more about that. Again, happy to answer questions. All right, so one of the things that we did, I was told to talk about what you can do. Part of that is social media. You might say, oh, it's a bane of my existence, Lisa. I don't care if you have one follower. I can give you, follow me, follow ERA Coalition, follow Virginia Now, follow Sign for ERA, even get an X account, a Twitter account. Again, I don't care if you have 0 followers. If all you do all day long is like and retweet, that's all I need you to do. We can get into Zoom. I can train you. This is all about amplification and messaging, because every time you tweet or repost, I guess they're calling it now, it buzzes a politician's butt. And they have somebody counting not only every letter you send, every call you make, but they're tracking social media like I showed you on our map. They're tracking it. So they know if you're interested and you care about this issue. Right now, they're not seeing it, folks. We need all of you to show how much you care about this. This is the principle, the bedrock principle, the foundation of equality. We can't do anything without constitutional teeth. All right, I want to have a little bit of fun. I've been super serious and I have a lot of material and I'm trying to go really, really fast because this program got awfully condensed. So that's the former Speaker of the House in the second photo there in Virginia. She's the first woman, first Jewish person to hold the role. You see Ellie Smeal, many of you probably know in the background, Bear Atwood, who's the number 2 at national now, and several other electeds in the audience. To the right of that is Senator Tim Kaine, and just to the right of Bear in the green dress is Representative now, Jennifer McClellan, who carried the bill in our state Senate and then is wonderfully now in Congress. And as you can see on the back of that bus, it says the Equal Rights Amendment. I've been saying this repeatedly throughout this presentation, gives laws teeth. You'll see the governor and the congresswoman, governor of New York and congresswoman of Texas standing right there in the photo as well. All right. So I was told that we need to share experiences and tactics. And what we're trying to do, right, is to fill a gap to be more inclusive. Black women, women of color, weren't invited to this fight. They weren't invited to the parade that was held in front of the White House. They were told when fighting for suffrage to walk behind everybody else. It is really, really important to have an intersectional, inclusive movement. So what I love about this and why I framed this slide this way is you have Cori Bush, a relatively young member of Congress carrying one of our resolutions to insist and compel that the archivist publish the Equal Rights Amendment. So we have our 28th Amendment finally recognized. Behind her is a woman in her 50s who's on the Board of Supervisors. To her right is a woman an advocate who's in her 60s, right? And then you see elect feminist, a young woman in her 20s. It's all ages, all backgrounds. And it's important that we have a very intersectional, very inclusive movement. All right, I'm really psyched to show you this. What I would love to do if we could raise enough money is take this out during the presidential election. So in 3 weeks, I had the opportunity to create a bus with what I thought was educational messaging, education on wheels, if you will, to say, what's the Equal Rights Amendment about? This 100-year-old thing, why should I care, right? You always have to answer the with them question, and that is, what's in it for me? So you can see end pregnancy discrimination, stop pay and promotion inequality, protect sexual assault survivors, lower maternal and infant mortality, protect women, girls, LGBTQIA+ people. Yes, folks, the ERA is not just for women, it's for all genders. There was a case handed down by the Supreme Court, something they actually got right, called Bostock, B-O-S-T-O-C-K. It defined sex as all genders. So this is a really inclusive amendment to protect us all from discrimination. You can see that sign for ERA QR code. I had it put on the bus. And yeah, so this was our party for the ERA Centennial Bus. And again, a page from history. We took it up to Seneca Falls this past July to celebrate the 100th. Too long, folks. We've been fighting for this way too long. Here's the other side of the bus. And our aim was to be a rolling billboard. Again, we have other messages. And the idea was, these are people having conversations on the bus. So these are speech bubbles in the windows of the bus. We're going to protect abortion rights. We're going to end violence against women. Yes, we're going to finally have equal pay benefits. And let me tell you something else. Nobody seems to know why the ERA is green. Why do we always, I mean, we've seen it in other colors, pink and purple too, for violence against women, for abortion. But green is the color of ERA. Why? Equal pay for equal work. That's where green came from. Money, money, money. Okay, let me show you some other fun pictures. So I have to tell you, it's always messy, right, when we're fighting for women's rights. My bus deal fell through 3 weeks before the big event. And when I mentioned earlier that I had to scramble, I'm not kidding you. I didn't sleep for 3 weeks because I didn't want to let anybody down. We put everybody who supported this effort on the front of their bus, all of their logos. If we can do it and do it again and meet you all in your states and raise enough money, I will take a bus out all year long in order to do what's right for women's rights and for this presidential election. So we had honk if you love equality. So we'd be driving down the road and people would be honking on the freeway as we took this, I think it was 7-8 hour journey from Washington, D.C. on up to Seneca Falls, New York. So it's about educating audiences, right? Not everybody knows what the Equal Rights Amendment is about and what it can do for us. Here's some of the group, not everybody that was on the bus. Sort of all of the message about unification and collaboration and the importance of the fight for the Equal Rights Amendment, needing us all. You can see the Congresswoman and Ellie Smeal and so many others in this picture. I'm here down here on my knees. This is a press conference, and unfortunately, the Senate seal didn't get adhered to the front of the podium, unfortunately. But we are here at what is called Senate Swamp, where the Senate holds its press conferences. And we were in sweltering heat, but we do whatever we can, whatever it takes. This is Rep. Ayanna Pressley, who's carrying one of our resolutions to make Congress, compel Congress to affirm the ERA and to lift this time limit. These are Virginia members celebrating and defending Virginia's 38th state status. They got to turn up. We got to get them to turn out. We got to keep this messaging ever present. We have to ask them to keep it in their talking points. We have to tell them repeatedly, look, folks, this could help us with reproductive freedom and abortion rights. Here's the former president of Virginia now. And I saw this quote from Richard Branson. You know, this idea of documenting history and creating memories is what I was sort of trying to do with these slides. And he had a quote that said, business opportunities are like buses. Well, no, I crossed that out and said, gender equality opportunities are like buses. There's always another one coming. And isn't that so true? We're always in this crazy fight. So here's some photos you can see, again, all ages, babies, folks in their 80s, people wonderfully of all colors came out to help discuss and champion and dialogue about the importance of the Equal Rights Amendment. And even when we stopped off at the Cracker Barrel, I brought the whole restaurant out to sign the bus. And they said, yes, I'd love to sign the bus, but what is this all about? Bingo, right? That's the education goal that I was trying to accomplish. So we just educated a whole new group of folks in the middle of Pennsylvania at a Cracker Barrel. Again, documenting history, creating memories, making everyone feel a part and a sense of belonging. It's up to every one of us to message the importance of the ERA. I know that sounds redundant and I keep saying it over and over again, but until people hear things something like 7 to 13 times, studies show, they don't get it. So I keep saying it and I hope you'll join me. This is all of us. We had the Attorney General from New York out in the left column. We had a state senator who carried it and pushed it and has been such a supporter and mentor to all the other states in what is now the has the most female legislators in a legislator in America, and that is neighboring state to California, Nevada. And that's Pat Spearman there with Rep. Cori Bush in the upper right-hand corner. More photos from our press conference. You can see we're all very impassioned. We made it onto the governor's website, Governor of New York, and you can see all of our advocates. And remember, I was just talking about the Cracker Barrel. Here's the lady in the middle signing the bus, and she asked me, Lisa, what is this all about? More photos that I've layered over all the cameras from our press conference. I'm always thinking about creating a moment to amplify and elevate and draw attention to the ERA. And those moments are heavy, heavy lifts. And I just want to put out there, most of us are all volunteers. I don't get paid for this work, and so many others don't either. And this is sort of the money shot, right? The bus in front of our nation's capital, where women and LGBTQIA people do not have equal rights. No matter what our fundamental principle says, we are not being honest about that, and we need to keep the powers that be honest. All right, so this is bringing me to a little bit of a conclusion here. I hope I'm not running out of time. So this is how it started back in July 1923, July 21st to be exact, 1923. Alice Paul and Crystal Eastman. And this is how it's going. And let me see if I have any notes I forgot to mention. I think I got it all. I'm happy to take your questions at the end. And if you need my contact information, there it is. That's my personal email address, theoutlook.com. The Virginia Now email address is there. I encourage you to use theoutlook.com. You can text me as well. That's my personal cell phone. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And here comes a real wonderful presentation with Gwendolyn Quezaire-Presutti. She is an award-winning actress, has been bringing to life unsung women whose stories she inhabits. She appears in schools, libraries, even assisted living residents, and on stage. Using primary sources and her deep sensibility, Gwendolyn celebrates women of character and courage like Zora Neale Hurston, Ona Judd, and today she brings us Harriet Tubman. Take it away, Gwendolyn and Harriet.
I have lived a long life and have much to tell, but if I told it all, I would be here clear to the next day, and I don't think I would last that long. 31 years ago, we all know what ended. The Civil War. I was there. Maryland, Virginia, South Carolina, Florida. I was there. And now my government does not recognize my service in the Civil War. I have become a hugger mugger. Do you know what a hugger mugger is? Invisible. Y'all know Queen Victoria. Well, she heard of me, and she sent me a Jubilee medal, a silk shawl, and an invitation to her Diamond Jubilee celebration. Now, what does that say? Well, before the Civil War, I arrived in Boston as a guest of the New England Anti-Slavery Society. Oh, it had to be about May 1860. Trying to raise money for my next run. While there, I attend a special session on women's suffrage and gave a speech on the same platform with my friends Gwendolyn and Wendell Phillips and William Lloyd Garrison. Now, they compelled me to use not my own name, Harriet Tubman, but that of Harriet Garrison. Didn't mind the message was the same. You know why they did that? You know why? It was right after John Brown's rising. And they feared for my life. While in Boston, South Carolina seceded from the Union. I had to make a trip south to rescue a woman and her children from Dorchester County. The woman, she carried a body sling with the baby in. And the other two children, they cling to the back of her dress, walking behind. And several men came along with her. And they brought with them a raggedy old quilt, a blanket. They carried in a basket. And they had some bread, some kindling, and a bottle of laudanum to keep that baby from crying. Keep that baby from crying. Now we walked all night, all night. Then I found a bush, a thick patch of bushes. And we laid out that old comforter on the frozen ground. And I went out porch. And I told him when I'd be back, but I had to go out porch. Well, I got back late. So they afraid that I'd be found. So they went further into the bush. Now, don't worry. I found them. I whistled, and they all came out. And I got those folks all the way to St. Catherine, Ontario, after crossing the suspension bridge over the park. Well, folks, this story that I give about Harriet Tubman is a 3,500 word script that I wrote from all my researches. So Harriet Tubman is a woman of unique qualities and abilities, even though she was illiterate. She kept an unblemished record of diligence, a legacy of sacrifice and struggle. Now, it was subject to fictional treatments more than serious historical examination. The elementary school version may be more palatable, but the real Tubman, far more inspiring. So when I give this performance, it is taking place in 1896 at the inaugural meeting of the National Association of Colored Women in Washington, D.C. And her health is waning, but her spirit was strong. So, how did I come to write about Harriet Tubman, to perform Harriet Tubman, to even search about Harriet Tubman? Because when I was in school, now that was a long time ago, I never heard of her. I'm up in my upper 70s. So in school, I never learned about Harriet Tubman. So I am an historian, an actor, dramatist, and storyteller. And I began my historical performing in 1997 after spending 30 years in social welfare. I started in 1997 at the University of Texas, Institute of Texan Cultures, working as an educational interpreter at the museum. So I choose historical persons if the story evokes my interest, and hers did. I learned unknown facts about her, and this really got me, because knowing this, I want to share with others. Now, here I learned that she fought in the Civil War, and that she was the only woman, black or white, that led a troop of 300 colored men into battle and never lost a one. That turned me on. I also learned that she was a spy and would send this information to the generals, and it even helped them win the battle in Jacksonville, Florida, because when she was in Florida, she spied as well. The other thing is, I have to feel the voice in my reading about these individuals. And so I have to get a sense of their body language through their voice that I'm hearing, their quirks, their flaws, their facial expressions. And so this resonates with me. And this is how I decided to do Zora Neale Hurston as well. I love Zora. And Ona Judge, which is new, and a lot of people are unaware of who Ona Judge is. And I spent 15 years with the New Hampshire Arts doing her story. I had to do an audition based on my historical records that I put into this story, and I got it. So, to finish up, I have theater and museum interpretation techniques certification from the Children's Museum of Indianapolis. I am a commercial copy actor with the Debbie Chasen Agency. I have received the ESA, Connecticut, portraying another character of Connecticut, Sarah Harris, who was the student of Prudence Crandall. The Institute of Texan Cultures, I received their Director's Award for the excellence in educational interpreting. I also have first place International Toastmaster Award from Texas Area 170. And here in New England, I received the Strawberry Bank Museum's American Lives. It is a timeline, living history, because I had the most authentic feeling with my character. So, in closing, my programs introduce untapped, accessible history that celebrates the rich diversity, ambitions, courage, determination, and heroism that women of color in the face of racism and violence. The presentations give a powerful, intimate, detailed portrait of shrewd women, true American heroes. And I thank you for this opportunity to share my love of becoming these women.
So thank you very, very much. And we must hustle along here. It's all so rich. The next presenter is a wonderful inspiration for us, a young woman, Prasidha, who will tell us how she and a few other students pushed to have the stories of women and minorities as part of their history curriculum in Virginia schools in 2020. She was featured on Good Morning America, NPR, and she is now a freshman at the University of North Carolina and plans to attend law school and end up in politics. Here's where we're going to put the weight right on the younger generation to keep us going. Take it away, Prasidha.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing introduction. And thank you to all the wonderful women who have spoken before me and will go after me. I'm really grateful to be a part of this amazing lineup. So thank you. And I will just jump right in. Maybe with like a raise of hands or just someone saying, can you see my screen, everyone?
Yes.
I see that. Perfect. Cool. Amazing. So I am going to be talking about integrating and highlighting women's history from a student perspective. And so, yeah, my name is Prasidha Padmanabhan, and I am the founder and president of WARE organization, which stands for Women for Education, Advocacy, and Rights. And so this is our little agenda for today. I'm going to go through this as quick as I can. But I'm going to go through introductions, and I have a fun little activity before we start talking about some of the work that we've done and how maybe this can continue in other organizations and strategies to promote women's history and women's rights. Okay. So a quick little introduction. This is the other students on the executive board and members of WARE organization who really help uplift the organization and ensure that we can do the work that we do, which is amending curriculums is one of our main focuses. And so we primarily have worked in Virginia, changing the district's curriculums and just including more women's history, and especially inclusive history of women of many different backgrounds. I myself am Indian, specifically Tamil, which is from the southern part of India. And my identity as an Indian American woman has always been really important to me. And so that is something that we hope shines through the different backgrounds of women that we highlight in our work. And so that is what WARE does. We also advocate for women's rights in many other ways, and I will talk about all of that. My contact information and WARE's is here, and that'll come back later as well. So without further ado, I do believe you all are able to raise your hands. There's like a little drop down menu in the bottom. If not, maybe use like one of the emojis, or if you can't, even if none of that works, just can be like more internal in your mind kind of thing. But I'm gonna ask a couple questions, and if you can raise your hand, if not, let's start out, because we're gonna compare which answers you do know and which ones you don't, and I think it'll highlight a little bit about the information we learn in schools. And so let's start out with this one. How many of you know the Canterbury Tales? It's okay if you haven't read it, just if you know of it, if you've heard of it. Yeah, I see some hands going up. Cool, cool. And again, if you can't do it, this can be a mental thing. And then how many of you know of the Tale of the Roses? If you don't know of it, put your hand down. And I see some hands going down now very frequently, very rapidly. Yes. Okay. So let's go to the next one. How many of you have heard of Paul Revere? You can raise your hand if you have. There we go. I see massive numbers. Yes. Okay, perfect. Now keep those hands up only if you also have heard of Sybil Ludington. And numbers going down. Okay. Let's see. How many of you have heard of the term dark matter? I am personally a public policy major, know nothing about physics, but I know of the term. So how many of you have just heard of it or know of it? Yeah, numbers going up. Perfect. Cool. And how many of you know who Vera Rubin is? Now actually know who she is? Hands going down. And lastly, how many of you have heard of Dr. Nandi Joshi or Dr. Mabel Pinghwali? The numbers are back in the tens now. Yeah. Okay, but I see some going up. That's wonderful. Okay, so I'm sure you probably got the understanding while I did this trivia, but the first parts of the questions were all male-centric except for question 4. So the Canterbury Tales was done by Chaucer versus the Tale of the Roses, who was written by Christine de Pizan. Those are both authors who were very big and very politically centered at the time, but only one of them is usually taught in schools, and that's the Canterbury Tales instead of the Tale of the Roses. Similarly, Paul Revere is known, this is my personal favorite example, but Paul Revere is known for signaling that the British are arriving using the lamps. However, Sybil Ludington is almost never mentioned in curriculums because she was the woman who was a teenager who rode horseback alone in the middle of the night to do the very same thing on her own. But her story is almost never in history books. The next thing is dark matter. Again, another physics term. You might not know exactly what it is, but everyone has heard of the concept, but most likely no one knows who Vera Rubin is. And she's actually one of the most famous scientists who helped discover it. And her story is similar to many other women scientists, Rosalind Franklin, Ada Lovelace, which there was a chat question about that earlier as well. And then lastly, Dr. Nandi Joshi was the first Indian Western doctor, and Dr. Mabel Pinghwali was a Asian suffragist activist who was also a doctor. And so these are things that often aren't in curriculums, but the topics are very male-centric and are taught about. Even suffrage, something that you might think is excruciatingly women-centric, often leaves out women of color. And so that is what we try to correct and have been able to successfully correct slowly but surely. And so I hope that was illuminating. Let's keep going. Not sure why. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to start by talking about student experiences as a student myself. So I recently graduated high school. I now attend the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. But back when I was in high school and we started this organization, a big thing that we did was using surveys and just analyzing what students felt, because I knew that in the WARE board, a lot of the students, including myself, had felt like our stories were never portrayed properly in curriculum. I never really saw Indian women. I never saw Asian women in general. And seeing women at all was a privilege at some points. And so this really illuminated that. And I have some anonymous responses from students in Fairfax County, which is one of the biggest counties in Virginia, where we have had begun implementing curriculum change based off of these responses. And so we see a lot of students wanting their curriculum and their education to shift away from these single story perspectives where it focuses just on one identity, namely a male, and usually a white male's identity, and if at all a woman, very unlikely to be a woman of color. And so learning through those single stories really makes students feel like they're underrepresented and that they don't have a part in their own history, which can really lead to a lot of issues, as I will also talk about later. And additionally, adding nuance to the conversation, again, adding these women and people of different backgrounds is what ensures we paint a perfectly clear picture and complete picture for students to understand our history and move forward with the present and the future. And so dismantling, perfect images of people, idolizing people, even wonderful people who we know as suffragists like Susan B. Anthony had a past that should be illuminated. Thomas Jefferson, that goes without saying, and things like that. And so adding the other perspectives to our stories, and especially illuminating women of different backgrounds, is excruciatingly important. And so this goes without saying, but why is women's history important? This was a direct comment amongst thousands of others that I received personally from students, actually. This one was specifically from a kid wondering why we even needed women's history. And so this really gets to the root of the problem, that people are able to trivialize such a large concept as women's history into just a few women and be like, do we really even need this? Can you even name examples of women who are left out? And just with that trivia, we were able to name like 10 women who their male counterparts are in curriculums, or the discoveries that they made are in curriculums, but they themselves are not, because women are not given the limelight, but their contributions are, and they're not given that credit. And so the first step is education and awareness. And this lack of education enables people, students, teachers, and especially parents and just everyone to continue to disregard women's contributions, think that women haven't been doing anything, that we're making allowances for them to do things now, when really women have been contributing and doing, in some cases, more than men since the beginning of the world. And so it's important to shed light on those contributions from the past and as we continue in the future, so that we don't have cases like this where students, people, whoever are, sending hate comments or just wondering, why is women's history even important? And so the other side of this is young girls. We also need to inspire young women. One of the favorite moments that we talk about at WARE is when we were holding a activities fair in Washington, D.C., and we had little girls come up to us when we were teaching about women's history outside the Washington Monument, and they gained new role models. We had a young girl who said that her new role model was Claudette Colvin, because she found out that there was a younger civil rights activist who looked like her and who was a teenager, and who did the same things as Rosa Parks just months before. And so we're able to empower younger women and teach them that people who look like them and act like them have been in curriculums and should be in curriculums for decades. And we need to shed light on that again. And of course, knowledge is power. That goes without saying. And so to touch a little bit about how we at WARE have done this with our school districts. These are a couple of, I have some responses from pedagogical activities we've done with teachers. And so working directly with second grade, third grade, all the way up through sixth grade teachers. I've held some professional development meetings, and we at WARE have worked with them to incorporate our actual curriculum into what they're teaching. And so this was from a couple of teachers. Again, they're all anonymous, but it's a thinking routine. This is directly from a part of the curriculum, the old curriculum. And we had some teachers be able to work with us and brainstorm what kind of curriculum changes they wanted to see and how we could help them and how we could create these new parts of the curriculum together. And so you can see here, they want picture books. They have things that they know the students are needing to see these influential women and how we can highlight them better. And so how we can kind of promote that collaborative effort. And additionally, there's a lot of text on the screen, but it's just to explain that these are some of the work that we've done with FCPS and continue to do in other counties now as well, and just help create these resources. And so on our website, we have Women in the Fields, which are biographical sketches of women from different fields, and it helps, empower children, especially women, from any kind of field they want to go into. They can see a woman who is already in there. And we have our collaborations, which I'll show on the next slide. We have various slideshows, PowerPoints, lesson plans that we do for these states and these curriculums to help really embrace women's history and ensure that it's in the curriculum. And so to give some examples of that, this is a biographical sketch, A Woman in the Field in Mathematics, on Shakuntala Devi. And she was an Indian woman who was extremely, extremely amazing at math. And that is about her. She was known as a human calculator. And then we have a couple examples here of some of the women of color resource that we've made that are actually in Virginia curriculum now. Unfortunately, due to a lot of government changes and our current governor Youngkin, we did have some issues with the new curriculum that's been coming out, but we have already put this in our Virginia district curriculum, and so luckily these changes have already been made and are continuing to be promoted, and that is another hindrance that we're working against, but that we are persevering through. And so we have Asian, Indigenous, Black, Hispanic women in the Civil War, women of different backgrounds, Susie King Taylor. And then we also have women in diverse fields, which again, I have showed here, and I'll put a link in the chat to share. And then these are a couple more examples just of some of the work that we've done. So we have women in Mesopotamia, we have women in ancient India, women from the south of India, we have women from China, women from East Asia, we have a women's history escape room for kids to get involved in, and some of our resources on Roe v. Wade and abortion and how we can help in different states. And I want to close by mentioning one of my favorite quotes that I actually got a deeper connection to from the National Women's History Alliance, which is, "Each time a girl opens a book and finds a womanless history, she learns she is worth less," by Dr. Mira Polak-Sadker. And so we never want another girl to open a book and find a womanless history, because women should never feel like they are worthless. And so let's work together to make sure that through the National Women's History Alliance and through these amazing organizations, we can embrace women's history and ensure that it's in curriculum so that we can fight for women's rights and fight for equality in every way. And so the Q&A will be at the end. And this is, again, my contact info and Ware's contact information. And I also have a link that I'll send in the chat now that has all of the links to Ware's various resources and our different press involvements. Thank you so much. Back to Martha.
Thank you, Prasidha. And next we have Katherine Kitterman from Utah, and we're going to try to get through what one of the accomplishments she did, which was to make within her state to speak up for the Utah suffragists, which happened to have gotten the vote how many years ago? 150 years ago, the same time that the Sentinel for Us Women got our vote. Take it away, Katherine.
Thank you so much, Martha. And thank you to the folks who've gone ahead of me and will come after. It's a great honor to be here talking to folks today who believe in the power of women's stories and want to work to share those. You're my people. I'm just going to share my screen quickly here. As an employee of the state of Utah, I'm just going to state right up at the front that the words I'm sharing are my own and, of course, do not represent any position of the state of Utah. I'm coming to you from Salt Lake City. I work at the Utah Women's History Initiative, and I've also been with the organization Better Days 2020 for the last 6 years. And I'll talk a little bit about that work. As Martha mentioned, really the suffrage centennial, the 19th Amendment centennial, was the catalyst for a women's history movement in Utah that has begun to grow in the past couple of years. So in 2017, Better Days was founded by a bunch of folks who actually were not historians or educators. There were people in marketing and public policy in government who were concerned that folks here didn't understand or didn't know the rich legacy that we had. of Utah women's leadership. And especially looking forward to 2020, they saw that opportunity with that anniversary of the 19th Amendment coinciding with Utah's 150th anniversary of our first votes back in 1870. I will say we passed a suffrage law after Wyoming Territory, but women here in Utah went to the polls first due to timing of elections. So if you hear the first to vote tagline, we're not misinformed, but it's true. But one of the important things that this organization was founded to do was to share Utah women's history through education, events, and art. And so I loved that last presentation. If we want to change the future and the present, right? Because the leaders of the present are the students of today, right? And they need to see, both boys and girls need to see women as leaders in our past and our present. Men and women need it too, but if we start young, we can help there. So moving forward, I'm just going to categorize the lessons that we've learned over the past 6 years in nonprofit world and moving into a government agency into about 3 different buckets that I could think of. There's probably more lessons we've learned, and there's a lot of mistakes and learning opportunities we've had along the way. But one of the biggest things that I am proud of in the work that a team of, again, dozens of folks have done over the past 6 years is working to tell stories in creative ways of Utahns. One of the things that was the most fun was this art and illustration project. We were able to commission a local illustrator named Brooke Smart to work on a series of 50 Utah women's advocates. This was part of that lead up to the suffrage centennial or the 150th anniversary of our votes, but we didn't want to feature only suffragists and only women who had worked in the political sphere. We wanted the anniversary to be an opportunity to celebrate Utah women's leadership in a variety of spheres and fields and communities within our state. And so we reached out to community leaders, historians, and descendants of many, many different women and asked folks who they would like to choose to represent their communities, talked with, again, with family members, and worked with Brooke on an iterative process, a very, very gracious process on her part as an artist to allow input on colors and positions and backgrounds. But again, Brooke is a children's book illustrator. And so what she does is she tells stories through art. So we found that using these art materials, both in K-12 curriculum materials for classrooms, as well as art exhibits, traveling exhibits, trading cards, posters, that sort of thing, it's really an engaging way to bring folks into the story. And I can understand, I'm really interested in photographs, of course, as a historian, and I can understand folks who also feel like black and white is boring and creates that distance between the viewer and the subject. And so this was one way that we chose to approach getting past that distance, collapsing that distance a little bit, so that we would be able to see the people in our communities who have made change happen. One of the things that's also so important is to see folks from your own community, from your own neighborhood. I grew up in Arizona, and I cannot name an Arizona woman who I learned about in my elementary through high school years of education. And it would have meant a lot to know, for me to know about the names of suffragists in my hometown, or the people who started this or that organization, or who had seen a problem and spoken out and made a difference. So that's what we were trying to do here, is to give folks coming up here in Utah the opportunity to see people right from their neighborhoods, right from their communities, who have made change happen, who have stood up, spoken out, sometimes worked against each other, right? But who have been advocates for women, for their communities, and for equality across the board. I'll come back to those illustrations later. The next thing that we have done, again, with that, trying to tell stories in creative ways, is just to find opportunities to bring people together that don't say women's history event. Again, we realize, I think I'm speaking to the in crowd here, like all of us would probably show up to something that was billed as a women's history talk or a lecture or a presentation, but we're trying to think about ways to reach audiences who are not already history buffs or may not consider themselves history buffs. And so what we've been doing is trying to find opportunities that will bring people together. For example, a community mural project. This is something that we've worked on over the past couple of years here in Utah, and taking the opportunity to partner with local gardens, to partner with local governments to install public art, but finding a way to honor the women who have shaped the community in those murals. So for example, here's a picture from 2021, bringing together, or 2022, excuse me, bringing together community leaders, nonprofit organizations, and descendants of women who were featured in a mural that was in a park named for Mignon Richmond, a great civil rights leader here in Salt Lake City. The next thing, again, along those lines, is that we've worked really hard to try to create spaces for celebration. We realize, of course, that history is not only celebration. There are positive and negative lessons to learn from everybody. But when we create moments where people can really tap into that legacy, tap into the pride in their local communities that they have, it's an opportunity for education and an opportunity to open up those conversations and the difficult conversations that need to be had. So we have found that those anniversaries, of course, in 2020 turned out a little differently than we'd expected. But student events, Women's History Month, of course, thank you, National Women's History Alliance, town and city festivals throughout the summer, all of these can be opportunities to highlight women who have shaped our local communities. And here are a couple of ways that we've done that. You can see some kind of posters and paraphernalia. We've hosted remembrance walks on significant anniversaries. We host a student event every year in our state capitol in partnership with the Lieutenant Governor to celebrate our Utah Women First to Vote history and teach about 800 school kids about different women who pushed rights forward in terms of voting and suffrage. But then we also have reusable or borrowable, I guess I would say, free resources that folks can download or print out or display. So that's another thing that we worked on is scavenger hunts, again, illustrated posters, backdrops, cutouts, you'll see some of those. One of the key pieces that I think has been so huge, in addition to the statue of Martha Hughes Cannon, who we'll soon send to represent our state in DC, is this memorial that you see in the bottom right here. It's called A Path Forward. It was installed at the site of Utah Women's First Votes in August of 2020, again, to try to commemorate that 19th Amendment centennial. It's there at the Utah State Capitol and has a pathway with doors and widening frames that talk about different pieces of legislation that expanded the vote. So this first door frame that you see these women standing next to is the 19th Amendment, but then we have the Indian Citizenship Act, we have Immigration and Nationality Acts, we have the Voting Rights Act, and other pieces of that path forward represented there. Having that place right there on the state capitol grounds is so huge. Maybe it's a small marker, maybe it's a statue. You know, there are places in our memorial landscape that we can use to gather people and create those spaces. So for example, on the voting anniversaries for Utah or on election days, we'll often leave some fun things at the memorial for people to find to encourage people to go and visit and reflect on the history behind the day. Another key lesson that we've learned over the years in Utah here has been that it's been so important to find champions and ambassadors for women's history who are outside of the historian networks again. So we've been very, very lucky in the past couple of years to have a lieutenant governor who is a history student herself and has been a champion for women's history in many ways. We've also found ways to work with, again, local mayors and leaders. We have a record number of female mayors in Utah right now, so that's been useful. But we find that if we can make this history useful to folks, they will be their own champions and ambassadors for women's history. So for example, it's great if political leaders want to talk about women who have shaped history, right? We all realize that they're doing it for different reasons, but it would be even better if you see those nonprofit leaders looking back at, here's someone who was solving that problem or trying to address that problem in a different way 50 years ago before me. What can we learn from them? And we're seeing that grow and spread throughout Utah. It's fantastic. One of the other best things is because we had that series of illustrations of 50 women that was completed in 2019, the descendants and historians and community leaders currently of those women who were represented have been fantastic ambassadors in highlighting those women. And again, it's because they have those resources, they have the illustrations, they have biographies on a website, they have things they can hand out to people or things to display to, again, make those legacies visible in their own communities. And that has been fantastic, having those folks go out and really evangelize to share, again, about the people in their own lines who they're so proud of. One of the fantastic things that has come out of this work is that the legislature approved in 2021 some funding for a women's history initiative to join the Utah Historical Society. So that's the position that I hold now. And this is a fantastic way to amplify Utah women's voices in the historical narrative. Utah is one of 2 states that doesn't currently have a state history museum, but that will be opening in 2026 finally. And it's been great to be involved in the process and make sure that women will be represented throughout and not only in small siloed sections throughout the museum, for example. We're also working to partner with local agencies, again, on community art projects, on scavenger hunts and Women's History Month events, on different resources that different folks need. We're able to sponsor and help different local communities whether it's a historical society or an art museum or even a town hall and a mayor, city government who want to do something about women's history. We're able to provide resources to them at free or low cost and be able to support what they want to do to, again, engage with that women's history in their local communities. Creating resources might have been a better first point to start off with, but again, as I've talked about these other pieces, I hope you can see that those resources that we've created in the past continue to be evergreen and have been very useful ways, again, for other people to share history, for other people to engage, whether or not we as an organization are right there in front of them or sitting at a table at an event. We always get this question in Utah, right, about what happens if there was a moment of time in which Utah was at the forefront of women's rights and suffrage, then what has changed now? As again, we have been consistently ranked the worst state for women for many years. The point of history, right, is to spark inquiry and to open up conversations, to open up exactly those questions. And so the resources that we create and share and that other folks use and download and display on tables or use to put on events that we don't even know about, right? Those resources then can hopefully spread a message that there is a legacy of leadership we should pay attention to, and can also call attention to ways that we can support women and amplify voices in changing what needs to be changed to create a better future for all of us. Two resources that have been incredibly useful for us, I'll just talk about here, are the different websites for Utah Women's History. So this first one you see here is utahwomenshistory.org, which was the Better Days Project. So this website contains the biographies of all of the women that were featured there, as well as about 100 more. So we have 150 bios. We're adding more every time. We have maps. We have short videos and walking tours that you can print out and take. There's local history, so you can look up the history by each of Utah's 29 counties and see which women have been active in your area. There's a lot of swag as well that's available to purchase, stickers and other things if you want to hold a celebration. Here at the Utah Historical Society, the Women's History Initiative website is more focused on research helps. So oral histories, blog posts, collection highlights, virtual exhibits, and other videos live here. Having those two ways for folks to engage with the story is really helpful. Again, one is maybe more geared for lifelong learners, and I should have mentioned here on the educational resources at utahwomenshistory.org, we have core curriculum aligned standards or standards aligned lessons for 4th, 5th, 7th, 8th, and 11th grades in Utah, which are the points where you intersect with Utah or US history.
Yeah, great. Great.
I just
We'll
wanted to
have
say
all
one
this
last thing, Martha. I'm just
Okay,
saying
sure,
use
sorry.
resources in multiple ways. If you've got something, use it as many ways as you can and get it out there. And that's all I wanted to say.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I do want everybody to know that we will make these tools available in a guide to everybody, not only here. And this is such a wealth of information and so important that you can start by going into your town and finding a wonderful woman to bring to the fore and celebrate her, and then make sure that we say her name. Say her name. Do you know about this woman and whatnot? But before we turn to Charlotte and Unladylike, I'm sorry that this is such a rush session. I would like to introduce you to our new interim executive director, Jill Zinkroff. And Jill, want to tell a little bit about what we're going to do, because we don't have the question and answer session. What can we do to make sure everybody gets some information out there? This is Jill.
Hello, everyone. And so we're going to keep continuing these conversations. So join us on social media, send Martha an email at, we put Martha at nationalwomenshistory.org, and we'll continue to share the stories and the information and get it out there amongst everyone. And I'm just so honored to be here in community with all of you.
And we offer a big welcome to Jill, who is our interim new executive director. She comes from I have a whole big introduction, but I'm not going to give it to you because I'd like to turn this over. She'll write you to Charlotte, who will tell us about one of the great series of women's history projects that she did on Ladylike.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're well. Thank you, Martha. Thank you to the National Women's History Alliance for including me in this fabulous webinar. I've been a documentary filmmaker for almost 25 years, mainly with National Geographic and PBS. And as Martha mentioned, I'm the creator of Unladylike 2020, along with my longtime producing partner, Sandy Ratley. We co-executive produced, directed, and wrote the series. The project was initially inspired when my two boys and I discovered a children's book about a pilot named Eleanor Smith, who in the 1920s, at age 16, became the youngest licensed aviator in the world. And when the men at her airfield expressed doubt that a girl could fly, she took up a dare, which was to fly under a bridge. You may know that barnstorming, these crazy aerial stunts, was a very popular form of entertainment at the time. So to prove herself, Eleanor ended up flying under all 4 bridges of the East River in New York City, dodging boat traffic in this little rickety biplane. And she went on to become a celebrated test pilot, broke many endurance records, and late in her career flew shuttle landing simulators at NASA.
Wow.
So yes, incredible. So by the end of reading her story, I was so inspired, but also deeply frustrated. Why had I never heard of Eleanor Smith? I thought there was only Amelia Earhart, right? So I started to research her, and she led me to other aviators, and they led me to women in other fields. And I slowly uncovered this treasure trove of stories, and decided to focus on the turn of the 20th century, because, against the backdrop of the suffrage movement, women had just recently won the right to own property. And despite facing highly limited education and career opportunities, they were starting to be the first in their professional fields, the first athletes, politicians, scientists, doctors, journalists, artists, entrepreneurs, and more, who had certainly never appeared in the history books that I was exposed to growing up. And when I realized that 2020 was the centennial of the 19th Amendment, I knew there couldn't be a more fitting time to bring this hidden history back to life. So that's how Unladylike 2020 was born. Guided by an advisory group of humanities scholars, we selected 26 women from diverse backgrounds, fields, regions of the country, race and ethnicity, and created 26 short films ranging from 9 to 12 minutes long, as well as a 1-hour television special, and found a distribution partner through PBS's flagship biography series called American Masters. And so the films premiered between March and August of 2020, basically between Women's History Month and August 26th, Women's Equality Day. In addition to the films themselves, we created curriculum for middle and high school students that is on PBS's educational platform, PBS Learning Media, which is used by over 1.6 million educators around the nation. We staged over 50 screening and engagement events, some in person, most unfortunately virtually, because it coincided with the first year of COVID, in partnership with libraries, museums, historical societies, national and local women's and girls organizations. And we're proud that the National Women's History Alliance was one of our partners, including in a national summit that we convened in, I think it was March of 2021, titled "Where Are the Women?" to discuss the absence of women in history and social studies curriculum and what scholars and organizers around the country are doing to address that disparity. Across all of these activities, we've been blessed to reach an audience of over 6 million to date, and it still has a life of its own, as evidenced by my being here with you today. So please visit our website at unladylike2020.com to learn more. And we're about to show you one of the short films about Mexican-American botanist and environmental activist Inez Mejia. But before hitting play, I just want to briefly mention that my filmmaking partner, Sandy, and I recently launched a new production company called Audacious Women Productions. continuing in our mission to tell untold stories about diverse women change makers and bring hidden history to life. And we are in development and fundraising for several new projects, one about the history of marriage from a feminist perspective, one about the underrepresentation of historical women in our monumental landscape. And we have a new film coming out in just a few weeks for Black History Month about Harlem Renaissance sculptor and arts educator Augusta Savage. So you will be able to stream that on the American Masters YouTube channel and on pbs.org by mid-February. So go to that website, audaciouswomen.com, to learn more. If you could please play the Inez Mejia film.
She's the most accomplished female plant collector of her time, and she did not start until she was 55 years old.
They say I don't act right, it's unladylike, how I wanna live my life.
1929 Brazil. 59-year-old Inez Mejia undertook the greatest adventure of her career, a 2.5-year expedition, traveling 3,000 miles up the Amazon River by steamship and canoe.
She went out collecting by herself with a guide because she realized that you can't go off into the wilderness totally by yourself because you don't know the terrain. Of course, being fluent Spanish, she can talk to all these guides. And it was interesting because she'd teach her guides how to do some of the pressing.
After more than 2 years in the wilds of South America, I find myself longing for a nice, quiet jungle again.
Inez Enriqueta Julieta Mejia was born in 1870 in Washington, D.C., where her Mexican father was stationed as a diplomat. At 1 year old, she moved to Mexia, Texas, a town founded by her ancestors.
Inez was very shy, very quiet, liked to keep to herself, read a lot of books. Her parents separated when Inez was 9 and immediately put her into a private boarding school. And so Inez's early life was probably very painful because she just was all by herself.
After finishing her studies, Mejia considered entering a convent. But in 1896, her dying father asked her to take over his business in Mexico.
He has a huge ranch. He's quite wealthy. She takes over the managing of the ranch and becomes very adept.
Mejia married twice. Her first husband died after a long illness. Her second bankrupted the ranch.
And at that point, it's just too hard on her. She literally goes into bed and crawls up in a fetus position. It's a mental and a physical breakdown.
In 1909, Mejia moved to San Francisco to seek medical help from Dr. Philip King Brown.
He was a psychiatrist. That was a very new field in 1909. He became the father figure that she never had.
Mejia remained under Dr. Brown's care for 10 years. At his encouragement, she joined California's budding environmental movement.
She became a valuable part of the Sierra Club and Save the Redwoods League on the forefront of fighting for the national parks.
I have been much distressed to hear cutting has been going on in Montgomery Grove. I'm heartily in sympathy with any effort to save these trees.
This shy woman joins this outgoing club with excursions to the Redwoods and excursions to Yosemite and camping out and going on hikes, and she just loves it.
Mejia decided to pursue science and natural history courses at UC Berkeley.
This is 1921. No woman goes back to college at 51 years old, but she did. And she discovered botany. Suddenly, here was the life goal that she had never realized before that she would have, and she loved collecting plants.
I have a job where I produce something real and lasting.
Women were to be confined to the kitchen, the garden, and the baby room. So botany was more acceptable for women scientists because it's a logical extension of women being caretakers. My name is Ina van der Broek. I'm an ethnobotanist at the New York Botanical Garden. Plants are really the essence of human life. Without plants, we do not have oxygen. Without plants, we do not have food. And at least 1 in 4 of our medicines is made from plants.
In 1925, Mejia took her first plant collecting trip to Mexico on a group expedition sponsored by Stanford University. But she soon realized she could be more productive alone. She secured funding from several natural history institutions willing to pay her 20 cents per specimen.
56 years old, and never stopped after that. She went into Mazatlan and then into the Sierra Madre Mountains.
My dryers get all filled up, and still numberless plants sit and look at me and announce that they're waiting to be collected. It is terribly trying to a greedy collector like myself.
Her trip didn't end exactly as she had planned because she saw a plant, reached over to get it, and fell down a cliff and got a few ribs broken and I think an arm.
Nonetheless, the expedition resulted in 500 plant specimens. One of them, Mejianthus mexicanus, became the first of many named in her honor. Mejia's reputation as the first Mexican-American female botanist grew, and botanical institutions around the U.S. sponsored her expeditions. For the next 12 years, Mejia collected plants across North and South America, from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego.
A well-known collector and explorer stated very positively that it was impossible for a woman to travel alone in Latin America. Well, why not? I decided to make my way right across it.
Ines very much did what botanists are doing now, minus the technological developments like DNA analysis. Collecting plants, naming them, describing them, classifying them, which is the basic building block of all biodiversity science. 1/3 of all the 450,000 estimated flowering plants that exist on Earth are under threat of extinction. There's urgency to protecting that plant diversity because we need them for our survival.
On her last expedition in Mexico in 1938, Mejia became sick and was soon diagnosed with lung cancer. She died a few months later at age 68, leaving much of her estate to the Sierra Club and the Save the Redwoods League. In a 13-year career, she collected more than 145,000 specimens.
A new genus was named for her, and then she had 50 other new species named after her, plus 500 other discoveries.
Over the last 3 decades, there has been a lot of talk about including women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths, and progress has been made, but we still have a long way to go, especially the representation of women from immigrant communities and women of color in science to be in leadership roles, to be recognized for their contributions.
In all of my travels, I've never been attacked by a wild animal, lost my way, or caught a disease. I don't think there's any place in the world where a woman can't venture.
So this is really for Penny and all the panelists. What strategies can be employed to ensure that women's history remains relevant, vibrant, and motivating?
Go, Catherine. Yeah.
I'll just say one thing, that we have found it very useful to invest the resources in good graphic design and folks who know how to put websites together and resources to make them look good. We realize that we've been able to get more purchase when folks are drawn to the things that we're talking about visually that way. There's a lot of other things, but that's one thing that stuck out to me.
Yeah, and I guess for me, it's as I said on my slide, is pay attention, be alert to what's going on. For years, I've listened to the classical music station in New York that has national and international listenership. And then I think last year they did one whole day for Women's History Month of women composers, but then they stopped. So I launched a multi-month campaign to actually check their playlist. Every day I went through the playlist and discovered that only 1 or 2 women composers were being played, even though there are many women composers. So then I would send emails. So I kept this up. So that's, and then I started to call it the mostly male classical music station. So that's just a small example of my finally noticing something and doing something. Did I have dramatic consequences? No. I think now the count is up to maybe 4 or 5 women. So that's a small example. Write a letter to the editor, but just pay attention. Ask all the time, where are the women? And not only where are the women, but also ask, what are they doing? What's the context? What's going on? And then make a decision about what you can or you cannot do, because there's always something. And I think Charlotte mentioned the fact that she has 2 boys, that it was a book that you noticed with 2 boys. Well, I raised 3 sons, and we have 11 grandchildren, but 5 of whom are boys. And so my 9-year-old grandson, Balin, just read a book about women's suffrage, and we talked about that. So we have to remember that with all the empowering of women and girls, which I've devoted my life to, there also needs to be attention paid to the fact that these lessons and these models are equally important for boys and men, so that again, they can get up to speed, and that the environment that these empowered women and girls go into is perhaps not so dangerous and hostile and dismissive, because I know from my 20-year-old granddaughter that stuff is still going on. So we really need to pay an inclusive, but also have a broad view of the context within which all these empowered girls and women are going to be living their lives in. So
anyone else want to answer that? Or Martha, we can wrap it up.
I guess I'll jump in, to echo what Catherine was saying about the importance of graphic design. You no doubt noticed that we used animation and beautiful imagery to bring not only the black and white archive to life, but also fill in visual gaps where no archive existed. And we have found that really appeals intergenerationally, and just makes it look less boring, I guess, than history might otherwise be thought to be. So that was a very intentional decision on our part creatively, as well as connecting the past to the present, right, and finding these modern stories of women walking in the footsteps of the women from the past.
And certainly the American suffragists were great branders. I have on my sash. They always wore the same colors. If you don't have a sash for Women's Equality Day, we have them in our store at the National Women's History or alliance.org. But it's great. I just wear mine sometimes just to make a fuss, and people say, "What's that?" And I don't have a a brand name on it, but it creates conversation, and that's another thing we can do. What you were telling us about the Barnstormer pilot, just say, have you ever heard of this? Did you know this? And tell the story, and then we get infected, we get impassioned. We have to spread it like it's a good disease, and that's how people learn about it. And we got to calm down a little. I'm too emotional about women's history, but thank you all of these great.
We have a raised hand, though. We do have a raised hand.
Okay.
Barbara.
I would like to thank you for putting this program on. We didn't mention historical societies, and I've been active here in Florida with the local historical society as well as some other areas of the country. And that's another way that we can spread the idea of promoting women's history. We did a very good program here in Venice on the centennial of women's suffrage. And we have historical interpreters going out in the community and speaking about prominent women in our history. So thank you very much again.
I just want to say that this has been this is Diana Madoshi.
Yes.
Very enjoyable and educational, and it's so vibrant now that you ladies have to hit the road. We are in trouble with promoting history like I have never thought we would have before. So thank you so much. And Penny, my comment about Frances Perkins, about Social Security, I keep asking people, do you know if Frances Perkins was the architect of Social Security? They don't know. And Social Security is a big thing now as they try to dismantle it. So we need you to pin that article, get it in AARP, get it all over. End of comment. Fabulous program. Charlotte, I loved it all. I'm activated, and I will be following through with whatever I have to do.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Anne.
This is fabulous. I've been a member of the Women's History Alliance for many years. I try to do what I can where I live to promote women's history, and I've got some great new ideas and places to go and things to do. So thank you so much for providing this information.
I just wanted to, I really enjoy the movie by Charlotte's production, The Audacious Woman. Love that. Hope to watch more. And maybe at some point I'd love to maybe do a screening here in the Washington DC area. I'm with I'm on the board of Virginia Now, National Organization for Women. So just anyway, but no, I wanted just to mention something I just saw recently, that Barbara Jones, a statue of Barbara Jones will replace Robert E. Lee's statue in the U.S. Capitol, Statuary Hall. I just thought that was very interesting. That's worth a documentary. They are probably as a beautiful statue of Barbara Jones holding a book. That's from the 1950s, basically 1951. Jones organized a student-led strike in protest of Jim Crow education. That's all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Now we have a few more. We've got an Amy who can talk. Amy, are you there?
Yeah, hi. Hi, Martha. Amy Simon here.
Hi, Amy.
It was so fabulous. I'm so inspired. I need like a seatbelt to watch the whole thing. It was just worth all the stuff at the beginning to the end. I do a play about women's history called She's History, and I'm doing it here in Los Angeles for Women's History Month at the E-Bell of Los Angeles, which is a historic women's club. And I hope I can get some information about the Equal Rights Amendment, and just to, I don't know what the audience is going to be like, but I have a bit of a platform, and I can't wait to use the information I got today to spread more of the word. It was just so inspiring. Thank you so much. And when's the next one?
Women's History
Month.
Month.
Thanks, Amy. Feel free to reach out. We really appreciate your helping us get the word out.
Now we have a Freddie K.
Hi, yes, this is Freddie K. Can you hear me?
Hi, Freddie.
Hi, Martha and Penny.
Hi.
Great to see you all.
Penny.
This is wonderful. And as Jill, as you said, it is wonderful to be in community with you. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. And I just wanted to offer and share that in Massachusetts, we organized for the past 13 years around the women's suffrage movement and have been together as Suffrage 100 Massachusetts.org. And we are becoming, as of Women's History Month, thanks to all of you for creating it, we will become the Massachusetts Women's History Center.
Woo!
And that will be virtual at first. Eventually, we certainly do hope to be brick and mortar, but at first we'll be virtual, and we will be announcing that at a Zoom event during Women's History Month. So please check out our website, Suffrage 100 MA for Massachusetts.org. We'll have it in there, and then perhaps through you all, I'm happy to share that as well. And a part of what we're doing is also creating the Massachusetts Women's Hall of Fame, which doesn't exist, and that will be our flagship program. And so we have all of you to thank for the wonderful groundwork, all the work you've been doing all these years, and we so appreciate it. And I'll just add, Jill, in particular, this evening I'm going to be seeing Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, and I look forward to telling her how she was included in today's program, and I know she'll be very appreciative, and thank you for that. So thank you all so much. It's great to see you.
And thank you also, Freddie. Freddie was one of the 100 women we had marching in the 2020 Rose Parade with the Suffrage 100 float. And Freddie and they're all dressed in white. It was the most spectacular thing. And thank goodness we did it, because then the COVID shut us down. But thanks, Freddie, for being a part of all of us.
Oh, I just want to thank everybody for a fantastic program. And just to let you know, here in Pennsylvania, through the Justice Bell Foundation, justicebell.org, I have been busy. Well, first I made a film with Martha Wheelock called Finding Justice, the Untold Story of Women's Fight for the Vote, that really centers on what Pennsylvania women did in carting around a huge bell modeled after the Liberty Bell. They called it the Justice Bell. And I'm hard at work right now on a book about the 1915 Pennsylvania campaign and the Justice Bell tour, which I am hoping will be ready soon. And I'm just inspired by what everybody is doing here, and just kind of doing their part to make sure that women's history stays in the public consciousness. And so thank you, everybody.
It's a really good film about how an object becomes that which we can talk about and tie ourselves into: liberty and justice and the rights of women.
Right.
So it's a wonderful film.
And the Justice Bell is beautifully displayed in the Valley Forge Park. I visited it several years ago, and it's beautifully displayed, and I was delighted. People continued to come in. It says one of the things I do is I sort of hang out to see, is anybody looking at this? But it's got a terrific display, interpretive material, and the bell itself. It's just awesome to visit landmarks. It's an awesome experience. There have been a lot more landmark statues and memorials, including the one to Harriet Tubman in Newark, that have been erected under the impetus of the centennial of women's suffrage. So check them out and just go have the experience of being in the presence of honoring women in a physical way in the public landscape.
And of course, it's absolutely mandatory, if you get to New York City, to go to Central Park and find the three great foremothers: Sojourner Truth, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Lucretia Mott.
And that's a really interesting example. I blogged about that a little bit ago because it's perfectly situated. It was fascinating to see because it's on a walk that has lots of people, and it caught a lot of attention. So for those people who are erecting memorials and monuments, think about where you put them. But that was probably the most observed landmark to women that noticed because of where they managed to get it situated, which isn't where they first wanted to get it situated, but it's where it's getting a lot of attention.
We have an EJ Scott. Has a hand raised. Do you want the last word from the hand raisers, EJ? I've sent an invite to unmute.
Thank you. I will. I'm a little ill here, but I've been really excited and happy that I could sit in on this. But I did want to hold up I was on the Governor's Commemorative Commission to honor the contributions of the women of Virginia. And we did a monument to women, the first ever in the nation. That's on a state capitol's grounds. And
it's
I would
gorgeous.
love, and great. I'm so glad you've been there. I would love to tell you all more about it in the future when I do have a better voice. But I did want to have that recognized that was something that we did here in Virginia.
Yay for Virginia.
And to add to that, we also have the Turning Point Suffragist Memorial Garden monument that talks about, has 19 stations because of the 19th Amendment that talks about women's suffrage. Yeah.
And actually, I wanted to add that the memorial, the commemorative wall of the 91 women who were imprisoned, was funded by Emily and Fred McCoy, and Emily McCoy is on the board of the National Women's History Alliance. And if Emily is still on now, I just she knows that I'm a huge admirer of what they've done with the Turning Points Memorial.
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Much of that was Emily's work.
Yeah, no.
Right?
Yeah.
And we served together on the Fairfax County Commission for Women. Back to Fairfax County, Virginia. Go Prasidha.
Great. Okay. Jill, do you want to take us out?
Oh, thank you. I'm not always great with the last word, but I want to also, just repeat Martha's words and saying thank you so much to all of you for being here and to our panelists, and more to come. I can't wait for part 2.
Thank you.
So much more to talk about.
Thank you.
Thank you all.